They thought they were making a cheap summer slasher. No one expected it to become a real-life nightmare. It began with one of the boldest lies in Hollywood history. On July 4, 1979, a full-page advertisement appeared in Variety magazine. It showed an iconic logo smashing through glass, promising a November release for a film called Friday the 13th. The problem? The film didn't exist. Not a single frame had been shot. In fact, it wasn't even financed yet. Director Sean Cunningham was essentially bluffing. Georgetown Productions hadn't signed the check. There was no cast, no script approval, no real plan, just confidence and a killer title. Because before it was called Friday the 13th, screenwriter Victor Miller had pitched something far less marketable, Long Night at Camp Blood. When Cunningham heard those three words, Friday the 13th, it clicked like a knife sliding into its sheath. It wasn't just a title, it was marketing gold. 2 words. Instant dread. And the gamble worked. Studios called, phones rang. People wanted this movie before it existed. Cunningham later admitted, everybody wanted this film. Sometimes in Hollywood, confidence sells before cameras roll. But where did this confidence come from? The answer lies in a theater in 1978 where Cunningham sat watching John Carpenter's Halloween. He didn't just enjoy it, he saw a blueprint. A lean, mean slasher machine. He later admitted he was very influenced by the structure of Carpenter's film, so he decided to borrow the playbook, a silent killer, an isolated setting, a string of brutal deaths. But Cunningham didn't want to copy Halloween, he wanted to outshock it. Controlled chaos. When production finally began in the fall of 1979, the chaos was immediate. Cunningham still hadn't cast the killer when filming started. So those early death scenes, the ones where a mysterious figure stalks and murders the counselors, weren't shot with an actor. They were shot with whoever's hands were free. When Annie's throat gets sliced in the Jeep, that's not Betsy Palmer holding the blade. It's special effects assistant Taso Stavrakis, Tom Savini's right-hand man. They made it work with quick angles, close shots, and practical gore. That's why the killer's face is always hidden early on. It wasn't just suspense, it was improvised filmmaking at its scrappiest. The casting of Mrs. Voorhees herself was equally chaotic. The producers had aimed high, very high. Their dream was Shelley Winters, a 2-time Oscar winner. She had the name recognition, and crucially, her career was on the decline, meaning she was affordable. But Winters wasn't interested. Next up was Estelle Parsons, who even negotiated to star before backing out at the last minute. Cunningham scrambled through names like Louise Lasser and Dorothy Malone, and then Betsy Palmer entered the picture. It wasn't some grand casting coup, it was desperation meeting necessity. Palmer herself thought the script was a piece of trash. She had no intention of doing it. But one rainy night her car broke down on the way home. She needed cash for a new one, and she needed it fast. So she said yes, never expecting anyone would see the film, let alone make it a cult classic. If not for a broken car, Pamela Voorhees might never have existed. And Jason? He might never have been born on screen. Palmer didn't just show up to scream and stab, though. As a method actor, she wanted to understand her killer. So she invented an entire backstory that wasn't in the script. In her version, Pamela had Jason out of wedlock with a high school boyfriend. Her parents, disgusted, disowned her. That shame twisted her, fueling her hatred for teenage sexual freedom and anyone who reminded her of that pain. None of this was written by Victor Miller, but it gave Palmer a psychological edge that bled through every frame. That's why Mrs. Voorhees doesn't feel like a cartoon villain. She feels dangerously real. Blood and pizza ovens. The real star of Friday the 13th, though, wasn't any of the actors. It was Tom Savini, the makeup effects wizard fresh from war photography. Savini was determined to make death look disturbingly, uncomfortably real. And he succeeded, but not without taking serious risks. Many of those legendary gore effects were created in the most unlikely place, a pizza oven. Inside the camp's kitchen, Savini and assistant Taso Stavrakis cooked latex appliances right where kids usually baked their lunches. The gory arrow through the neck effect? Pizza oven magic. It was DIY horror at its finest. Low budget, high nightmare fuel. But the special effects weren't just creative. They were dangerous. For Bill's gruesome death, an arrow through the eye, Savini used a fake blood mix that included PhotoFlow, a chemical designed for photographic film, not human faces. The blood pooled under actor Harry Crosby's latex appliance and seeped straight into his eye. The pain was instant. When they peeled off the prosthetic, his eyes were burning. The crew rushed him to the hospital. Thankfully, he recovered, but it was a brutal reminder of how low-budget horror got made in 1979. No digital safety nets, just chemicals, latex, and a lot of risk. At the time, Harry Crosby was actually the biggest star on set, son of legendary singer Bing Crosby. Kevin Bacon was just the new guy with a minor credit in Animal House. Nobody could have guessed that decades later, Crosby would fade into trivia while Bacon became an icon, his bloody death scene etched into horror history. And that death scene, Jack's brutal neck stabbing, is itself a technical miracle. To pull it off, Bacon slid his head through a hole in the bed while a latex chest and neck appliance was glued on top. Underneath, Savini and his crew crouched, ready to stab the arrow upward through the fake throat. But mid-take, disaster struck. The blood hose disconnected. Rebuilding would have taken hours and eaten into their already tight budget. So Tasos did the unthinkable. He grabbed the hose and blew into it with everything he had. Blood exploded out of the fake neck like an artery burst. One take, one desperate hack, one legendary horror moment. The attention to raw authenticity extended to the actors too. Director Sean Cunningham wanted genuine reactions, not performances. When Alice discovers Bill's body pinned to the door by arrows, actress Adrienne King had been intentionally kept from seeing the completed effect until cameras rolled. When that door swung open and she saw the arrows sticking out at odd angles, blood dripping, the body swaying, her scream wasn't acting. It was pure shock. Cunningham later admitted he wanted that visceral response. It worked. Later, during the climactic fight between Alice and Mrs. Voorhees, King got hurt for real. Betsy Palmer swung the dulled prop machete too close and nicked King's finger, drawing actual blood. That piercing scream? Completely unscripted. Cunningham didn't yell "cut." He kept rolling, capturing an authentic moment of pain that made it into the final film. The fight for an R rating. When Friday the 13th was first screened for the Motion Picture Association of America, the ratings board had a collective heart attack. The original cut was so graphic it received an X rating, the same classification used for pornography. An X meant no major theater chains, no advertising, and zero box office potential. The film they'd gambled everything on was essentially unmarketable. Cunningham and Savini were forced to go back and trim the most shocking moments. Kevin Bacon's throat scene, the axe to the face kill. They shortened blood sprays, cut lingering shots, and reduced the overall brutality just enough to secure an R rating. Ironically, the cuts made the deaths seem faster, sharper, and even more shocking. One ratings battle transformed it into one of the most infamous slashers of its era. The legend that wasn't supposed to be. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about Friday the 13th is what it became versus what it was meant to be. In Victor Miller's original script, Jason Voorhees wasn't a deformed swamp monster. He was just a normal boy who tragically drowned in Camp Crystal Lake. No rotting face, no supernatural horror, just a sad memory fueling his mother's rage. But financier Philip Scuderi wanted something more chilling, so he brought in another screenwriter, Ron Kurtz, who rewrote Jason into a deformed child, the one we meet in that nightmare-inducing lake scene. That last-minute change transformed a background tragedy into one of the most iconic horror figures ever created. That legendary lake scene, Alice floating peacefully before Jason bursts from the water, was filmed in just one take. Young actor Ari Lehman was hiding underwater, barely able to breathe, waiting for his cue. The water was freezing and the crew had only one shot because the makeup, prosthetics, and camera setup were too complex to reset. When the moment came, Lehman launched himself out of the lake, grabbed Alice, and boom, horror history was made. And yet Victor Miller hates what his creation became. He loved his script because the killer wasn't Jason, it was his mother. Pamela Voorhees was a warped maternal figure protecting her son in the most brutal way possible. When the sequels turned Jason into an unstoppable masked slasher, Miller felt betrayed. Jason was dead from the beginning, he said. He was a victim, not a villain. To him, the magic of the first film was that the monster was a mother's twisted love, and Hollywood, in his eyes, killed that. The production wasn't all blood and chaos. Deep in the New Jersey woods, the cast and crew had an unexpected neighbor, rock legend Lou Reed. While bodies were being slashed on camera, Reed was living on his farm just down the road. He'd stop by the set, hang out, and play impromptu concerts for the crew. Picture it, late-night guitar riffs echoing across the lake, mixing with crickets and fake screams. Horror by day, rock and roll by night. The film was shot at Camp Novi Bosco, an actual Boy Scouts camp in New Jersey. Decades later, it's still operational. Kids roast marshmallows where fake blood once splattered. The camp now holds special horror tours for fans who want to step into the movie's skin. The lake, the cabins, the woods, it's all there, frozen in time. A real-world shrine to Jason's cinematic birth. Composer Harry Manfredini was searching for a unique audio signature for whenever the killer appeared. He heard Mrs. Voorhees whisper, "Kill her, Mommy," in the script. So he isolated Key from kill and Ma from mommy, hissed them into a microphone, and ran it through 70s echo effects. Instant terror, a sound effect born from 2 syllables, changed horror forever. If I haven't scared you off yet, protect yourself from demons by subscribing right now. I can't guarantee it'll protect you, but if you also like the video, your chances of luck increase dramatically. When the horror became real, the entire film cost $550,000 to make. That tiny investment returned over $59 million worldwide. A low-budget gamble became a box office bloodbath. But for Adrienne King, the woman who survived Camp Crystal Lake on screen, the real nightmare was only beginning. Just as the film was reaching its peak success, King's life turned into the very horror she'd acted out. An obsessed stalker began following her. Not a horror fan looking for an autograph. A psychopath who'd seen the film with friends and became fixated on her because she reminded him of someone who had wronged him. He learned where she lived, where she exercised, where she ate lunch. He would slip Polaroid photographs under the door of her New York apartment, pictures he'd taken of her the night before, proving he was always watching. He broke into her apartment multiple times. He defaced her artwork. He threatened her parents' lives. And then one night he was waiting inside. He held a gun to her head. When King went to the police for help, they laughed it off. "What do you expect?" they told her. "You were in Friday the 13th. This was 1980. Stalking wasn't considered a crime. There were no laws, no protection, no one who would listen." King was trapped in a living horror film with no final girl escape. She fled across the country to Los Angeles. He followed. She fled to London. He followed her there too. For a year and a half, this went on. The star of horror's biggest hit being terrorized in real life while authorities did nothing. Eventually, he was caught. But the justice was a cruel joke. 1 night in jail and a slap on the wrist. His word against hers. When Friday the 13th Part 2 went into production, King begged to be killed off. She couldn't handle doing another film while living this nightmare. And in a twisted piece of meta-horror, the filmmakers wrote her death scene to mirror her real-life terror. Alice, alone in her apartment, painting to cope with trauma, stalked by an unseen killer who breaks in. It was her reality, put on screen. The trauma destroyed her acting career. Years later, when she was cast in the soap opera All My Children, she had a severe anxiety attack moments before going on camera. She couldn't do it. The stalking had broken something inside her that therapy couldn't immediately fix. She disappeared from the screen for nearly 3 decades, hiding behind voiceover work where no one could see her face. The man who terrorized her is dead now, but the damage he inflicted lasted decades. King didn't return to on-screen acting until 2010, 30 years after Friday the 13th made her famous. 40 years of haunting us, Friday the 13th was supposed to be a quick, disposable slasher. But what emerged from those dark New Jersey woods in 1980 wasn't just another horror film. It was a cultural earthquake that changed cinema forever. A risky idea, a shoestring budget, and a handful of unknown actors gave birth to one of the most unstoppable legends in entertainment history. But behind the screams, the blood, and the terror, there was real danger, real pain, real trauma. The people who made this film took genuine risks. Chemical burns, dangerous stunts, careers derailed by violence that followed them home. They thought they were making a cheap summer slasher about a killer at a summer camp. They had no idea they were creating something that would haunt them and the world for over 40 years. The horror of Friday the 13th didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. For some, it was only just beginning. And speaking of beginnings, you look like just the kind of loyal subscriber who would enjoy Halloween, which is handy because it's coming up next. Click now to expose the 20 weirdest facts about that horror.
Wow, that was weird.